It was a busy Wednesday for the Baltimore Ravens, and we'll talk about risers and fallers from training camp so far. Also getting into Jadeveon Clowney, Rashod Bateman, Broderick Washington, and so much more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens. We're your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast here. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire here, as always, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I appreciate everybody for tuning in, making us your first listen each and every day. Free and available, as always, all podcasting platforms. That includes over in video form on YouTube. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code Locked On to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. I'm excited for this episode today. We have a very special guest, a first-time guest on the show, Rocco DiSangro of Fox Baltimore. Also is one of the hosts of the Rip and Rock podcast. And Rocco, I'm excited to have you on. It's been a busy offseason for the Ravens. I know we had to deal with the Lamar Jackson situation. Now we're in training camp and we're done with that. How it got done before the draft, thankfully. But how you doing? How's the summer been for you?
It's great, man. Kevin, I really appreciate you having me on first and foremost. Love the content you put out, this podcast you're doing. I mean, you're doing some really great stuff. This fan base loves you and you can see it. So thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm excited to talk Ravens with you because I think there's a lot of excitement this year, especially around a team that, look, we know over the past two seasons have dealt with a ton of injuries, disappointing from the expectations they were given, but expectations seem sky high this year. The new offense, I think, has to be a huge part of that with Greg Roman out, Todd Monken in, Odell Beckham, Zay Flowers, and those guys coming in. But I want to get your thoughts on what you've seen so far through training camp, Rocco, because it's a nice time to kind of figure out, well, who's doing well, who's not. And now there are trends. I always say early on, like a day or two, a week or two into training camp, there's still time for some guys to step up. But now we're starting to see trends. The preseason coming up in just a couple days here. I wanted to start with some guys who you think have really taken their game to the next level in training camp, guys who you think have exceeded expectations to your eyes so far.
I think first and foremost, and I don't know if you would say exceeding expectations with this guy because he's kind of hitting the nail right on the head with what he's doing as a rookie. And it's Zay Flowers. That's by far one of the standouts for me at camp each and every day. Just his fast twitch motion, the way he separates from cornerbacks, his demeanor, just how he carries himself. I think Ravens fans, and you've seen it, in the national media, fans should be excited for Zay Flowers because he is by far one of the best receivers out there right now. We're going to get a better gauge of what Zay Flowers is really all about, these preseason games, depending on how much he plays, whether it's a drive, two drives, if really at all. I definitely think we're going to see Zay Flowers out there for the preseason, but this dude is as advertised with what he's bringing to the field. So I'm really excited personally to see him get out there and play. And you look at a guy, some of the defensive backs as well, like Marlon Humphrey, he's, former All-Pro, Pro Bowler. And as far as exceeding expectations go, it's just like he's stepping up as a leader. And it's really cool to see Kyle Hamilton, those matchups with Mark Andrews in camp. You love them. Mark wins some, Kyle wins some. That's been one of my favorite matchups to see. So those guys for sure for me. And then a rookie stepping in, being thrown in with the ones, Salah Amuvai Laulu. It's his name. I try to get it out every time. Yeah. They just call him Salah, but I try to do him the justice of saying his full name. But he got the first team reps for the first couple weeks, and Harbaugh kind of said, like, week 2, week 3, John Simpson's going to get those first team reps. So for Salah to be, come in, be drafted where he was drafted and kind of step in, and, his teammates said it, Linderbaum said it, Ronnie Stanley, is it being thrown into the fire? It's pretty cool to see as well. So the rookies for sure.
Yeah, you're better than me. I'm just Salah for now. I'm still, and I have a hard last name, so I always try to respect, getting the names down first before I actually go out there and say them. But you did a good job there. I'm impressed with your Salah last name ability. But one guy, Rocco, I think has kind of blown a lot of people out of the water is Nelson Aguilar, who, if you go back to when he was signed, I always tell the story of if the roles were reversed and the Ravens had signed Odell first, I don't think there would have been nearly as much, I guess I'd call it backlash that we saw to the Aguilar signing, because I think everybody has just been so scarred here in Baltimore about, well, they just bring in the veteran wide receiver and that's the only move they make. And so Aguilar was their first signing and everyone goes, they can't do it again. Why are they doing it again? And I said at the time, I said, look, it's fine if it's a move, but it can't be the move. And the Ravens showed, obviously, they brought in Odell, they drafted Zay Flowers. But to me, Aguilar was like, all right, he'd be like a solid fifth wide receiver. But I think, he's been one of the standouts of training camp so far, making catches left, right, and center. How's he been?
He had a stutter step move today. I think it was on Jalen Armour Davis. Sorry. And while he dropped the ball, the move he made, it was just like a hesitation, hit him with the stutter step, kind of turned JAD around a little bit. And he got a ball thrown to him at the sideline. It was a little high, and he went up and tried to catch it. And I don't know if he would have came down and bounced anyway, but the separation factor there, and I know he's going up against a second-year guy, Jalen Armour Davis. He had his injuries, his rookie season, didn't see a whole lot of playing time. But Nelson Aguilar, from what I saw, not only today, but the last couple of days or weeks, I think he is really going to be an under-the-radar signing, especially for this receiver core, because you look at him in Philly, coming in as a first-round pick, a lot of hype around him, and the whole – drops. That was his big thing, dropping passes, and people got on him there. And you feel that pressure in Philadelphia. Like, you see athletes come and go, and they deal with it. So the whole unlike Aguilar thing where the guy went on the news and said, I'm catching babies out here unlike him, I think that's in the past for him, and I really hope it is, because his mindset, talking to him after that stadium practice, he seems so chill. He seems so happy to be here. And it's like, you look at where he was in Philly, you look at where he was in, with the Raiders and with the Patriots. Here, he doesn't have to be a 1. He doesn't even have to be a 2. He can be, play the role where he doesn't have to be the guy, but he can really help this team out in more ways than one, where he's at and where they brought him in at. So for sure, I think Nelson Aguilar could have a really under the radar season for the Ravens in a good way.
Yeah, this isn't like Aguilar's going to be their number 2, and he doesn't have to be, because they have Odell, Rashod Bateman, Zay Flowers, and if there's an injury, I feel a lot more confident in Aguilar stepping up or Devin Duvernay stepping up, as opposed to maybe what they had last year when I think they took a big risk going in with the young guys they had. It obviously did not pay off for him, but it feels like Devin Duvernay's been kind of a forgotten man, Rocco. It feels like we haven't really, because Aguilar's been stealing all the hype from him. It was a 4-5 battle. I was really excited to kind of see, but it feels like Aguilar's kind of taken the hold of that job. How's Duvernay been so far?
Duvernay has been, I don't want to say he hasn't caught my attention in practice with anything he's really done. And that's not a knock on Devin Duvernay by any means, but I think this season with the guys they brought in, Devin Duvernay can be a return specialist like he went to the Pro Bowl for. And really with that, I'm not saying he can't help this team out as a receiver, but the guys that are sticking out, the guys that have caught the attention of me for sure throughout camp has been Odell Beckham, not just because of his play, just what he does, like the persona, everything he's about off the field, and he's just all smiles. He was interacting with the crowd today. Zay being a rookie, Bateman coming back today, ton of eyes on him. So I don't think the Ravens are going to bury Devin Duvernay by any means in the offense. I really hope that he gets to shine in the offense, because you saw last year they were calling him Debo Duvernay, some of the guys, because he was in a role of they would line him up in the backfield a little bit. They would run some sweeps with him, and then they would try to get him the ball as well as a receiver. So Devin Duvernay, I still think, can be very versatile for this offense. It just depends on where Todd Monken is going to want him and use him this season.
Yeah, I feel like with what we saw from him last year, I was expecting him, I guess, to pop more in training camp, which isn't to say, like you said, he's not going to be a part of the offense or anything. But at this point, with there being so many risers, there are fallers to that degree too. Not everybody is impressed so far. Who are some guys, Rocco, that maybe you thought were going to make more of an impact so far than they have?
Wow, that's tough. And I kind of really have to think of the guys like that. I'm thinking offensively, defensively. I mean, the defense shines all the time. It was like you talk, the big practice they had on Saturday, and that was kind of there was a lot of hype around that, and the quarterbacks kind of got the the wrong perception of that practice, I feel like, because of what it was. And people kind of came to the defense of the quarterbacks. They were like, it's a structured practice. This is going to happen sometimes, and understandably so. People that Kevin, I really don't know right now, man. It's so, for me, like I don't know, it's my second training camp. So I'm looking at these guys and seeing how they're like teeing up and everything I really can't give you a name right now. I really can't. As a
one who I've been in, I'll ask you about one guy who I think might be on the stock down a little bit. Has Ben Cleveland kind of been all but eliminated from that left guard spot so far?
That is a good one. And okay, so I had to think. With Ben Cleveland, I don't know if he's been eliminated from that left guard spot right now, but from hearing John Harbaugh talk about Saleh and then talk about John Simpson, and these two are going to flip-flop, you don't really hear much about what Ben Cleveland's going to do in that aspect. So I would kind of put Ben Cleveland in there with that. And he struggled last year with, getting on the field to start training camp. Like, remember this time last year, he was trying to get the conditioning test done, all those other things, all those external factors kind of. And when he did get on the field, like, it was like, all right, what are we getting out of Ben Cleveland? So I think I don't think this starting left guard job is one right now. I don't think it's a 2-horse race by any means. I think guys can establish themselves. And listen, and here's a dark horse right now. Don't count out Pat Ricard as far as an offensive lineman. I'm not saying he's going to start at left guard, but he's getting reps. And he was working it with the offensive lineman. So don't be surprised if Pat Ricard gets some reps on the offensive line at left guard, maybe who knows, depending on his injury. So,
man, I did not have Patrick Ricard starting left guard on my bingo card, even last week.
I don't think it's going to be starting left guard, but I'm telling you what, I think it's called Pancake Pat for a reason. We've seen the ability to block, and working with the offensive lineman, it kind of raises some eyebrows. Like, all right, what are we doing with Pat Ricard here? What's going to be the deal? So, I don't know.
Yeah. One guy who I feel like they like a lot is Ben Mason. Like, I feel like they're trying to utilize him in a lot of different roles. And so I don't know what that means for Patrick Ricard and everything that happens with him, because they can save about $1.7 million this year if they decide to get rid of him. I think he's a really good player still, but it's just a question of where does Todd Monken see his role? And obviously the experiment on the offensive line means they're not exactly sure where he is right now.
And I think when you talk about like the saving money aspect of that, you think that's not going through Ricard's mind a little bit, and he's thinking about that. What can I do? Where can I go? How what fits me the best on this team, where I can help this team the most at what position? So it will be interesting to see what happens with that. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's a Pro Bowler. He's been there, done that, and he's one of the best fullbacks in the league by far. But don't rule anything out, man. Things can get crazy. Who knows?
Yeah, and I mean, if there's one thing I'm not going to do, it's count out Patrick Ricard. Obviously, came into the league as a defensive lineman from Maine as an undrafted guy, played defensive line and fullback for the Ravens before transitioning over. So if there's one guy who can position switch, hey, it's Patrick Ricard on that offense.
Oh yeah, for as big as he is, he's just an athlete, man. Like, it's crazy, playing all over the field for sure.
And for him to be that guy who can go everywhere, he's set up before himself. Like, he's a jack of all trades guy. He's bigger of a role than he is in terms of he can play in line. He can do different. Now, is he a slot receiver like Greg Roman had him do sometimes? Probably not. No disrespect to Patrick Ricard, obviously, but we'll see how the Ravens try to utilize him this year. Coming up, though, in the second part of the show, we'll be diving in to some training camp takeaways from Wednesday. Obviously, talking about Rashod Bateman, how he looked in his first practice off the PUP list. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Plenty to talk about on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. In August this year, and you know what that means, the official start of fantasy football drafting month. And you can get championship ready for your home league by trying out Best Ball on Underdog Fantasy. All you do is one live snake draft, so no waivers, no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every week. I've actually done Best Ball. It's an intriguing twist on what actually fantasy has been, over the course of however long it's been around, because you get to incorporate everybody on your team. And if a guy performs well on your bench, they get moved into your starting lineup. And Underdog is the easiest place to play fantasy football and the best place for Best Ball. Best Ball Mania 4 is the largest fantasy football tournament ever. And you can try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back and even bigger, with $50 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner drafted their team in July, so don't wait around. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code LOCKEDON to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code LOCKEDON. We're back. Our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Rocco DiSangro. And Rocco, the big story of Wednesday, I have to start off with Rashad Bateman coming off the PUP list. It's been long anticipated with the foot surgery. There was some concern about when he was going to be back, but officially made his return to the field on Wednesday. Looked very happy to be back there, hugging everybody and everything. So he's a guy that means so much to the Ravens offense. And when you get into what the receiver room looked like last year versus what it looks like this year, there's going to be pressure taken off of Bateman with Odell there, with Zay Flowers, as we talked about in the first part of the show. But how did he look in his first practice back? And is there more of a ramp-up period expected for him in the next couple of weeks?
I believe so. And he looked great, like as good as Rashad Bateman can be, like what you expect from him. But he's not going to be 100% today, tomorrow, maybe not this week. As far as like what he's, the work he's going through and what he's doing. Today, he worked in with the individual drills. And then when one-on-one started, I think he stood around and watched. But then when he got into 7-on-7s and team drills, he was on another field with Pat Ricard, and they were it looked like they were stretching at first. I was kind of trying to watch what they were doing over there and watching what was going on the field through team drills. So I was kind of getting distracted with both of those things. But the reception he got from his teammates, from the receiving room, from James Prochet, who's his guy, it was really cool. Just like hugs all around. Like you said, he was hugging everything and anyone. And for this fan base, it's great to have Rashad Bateman back. It's great to see 7 back out on the field, whether he's 100%, whether he's at 85, 90%. This is a guy that Lamar Jackson truly believes can be the number one receiver, that this fan base truly feels like can be the number one receiver. And for Bateman, this is a year to go out and prove that, because not that he didn't last year, but the injuries really hurt the cause as far as that goes, and he has no control over that. But this guy, through those first couple games with the Jets, with the Dolphins, I mean, he looked like he was going to be the number one receiver on the team. When he got hurt, changed everything. So him coming back, it is so big for the offense. It's so big it's big for Todd Monken too, because he's got another weapon, Lamar Jackson too, because he's got another guy to throw to. So for Bateman right now, I think, like you said, we're going to see a bit of a ramp-up period. We're going to see them ease him in, not rush him back, because why would you right now? But come week one of the regular season, fans should be very excited to see Rashad Bateman back out there on the field and playing football again and loving it.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, because through those first couple of games, through those first games, two things. Lamar was the MVP of the league through the first 3 weeks. Obviously, it did not end that way. But a big part of that was how he and Bateman established that early connection together. And we know how good of a connection like Lamar and Mark Andrews have together. That's never going to be broken. But they were establishing something. Obviously, Bateman went down midseason, then Lamar went down a couple weeks after that. So having both of those guys healthy, with adding Odell, with adding Zay Flowers, and obviously the Todd Monken aspect too, it just adds so much for Lamar there. But I know, Rocco, a lot's been made about the offense and some of the, struggles they've had so far. I'm not hitting the panic button on that right now, because, again, it is training camp, and this is when you want the mistakes to happen, right? You don't want them to happen in a close game in the regular season. You get everything out now, get all the mistakes out, those 9 interceptions they threw on Saturday, as he talked about. I want that to happen in a game instead of Lamar throwing 9 picks in a game that means something for the division. But during Wednesday's practice, who won? Was it the offense or the defense?
From what I was able to see, because with me, with the TV thing, I wish I could watch the entire practice. I don't get to sit and watch the entire practice the whole time, because I got to go in, edit video for our sportscasts and whatnot. And we kind of write up articles as well. So it's a lot of when I go out, I try to watch as much as humanly possible. So from what I saw a lot of one-on-ones. The offense is going to win a lot of one-on-ones, like the receivers. When I went out for team, the offense was moving the ball pretty well. There were a couple pass interference calls, but it looked like a day to me that the offense won. Well, I could be wrong. There could be, someone who watched the entire practice, play after play after play after play, might tell you the defense won. From what I saw, the offense looked pretty good today, for sure.
So who won the one-on-ones that you were able to see?
The one-on-ones, it was, who was it? I think I watched a Mekhi Polk one, which is he left practice today, and he lost on a pass interference one. Jalen Armour-Davis got beat on a few of them. I think Odell he almost made an unbelievable one-handed catch that would have gone viral everywhere. But there were PIs there as well. But it was, and then Zay beat Marlin in a one-on-one, but it wasn't like a deep route. It was like a start at the line, stutter step, create some separation. And those are tough for, defensive backs. And like 90% of the time, I feel like receivers are going to win those battles because a one-on-one has nothing to do with coverage or what you're going to do in a game situation. I do want to say, though, defensively, what I did see today was the guys were kind of ready to hit. And like they got physical today. So you saw the Patrick Queen, I think he dumped, it looked like, I forget if it was Justice Hill off the top of my head, but he dumped the running back like on his back. Roquan was getting physical. Marcus Williams getting physical. So physicality wise, defense won that battle for sure.
I was going to ask you about that. Have you kind of seen the physicality ramp up over the last few days as they get ready? It seems like the players are ready to hit somebody else that's not their teammates.
Yeah, man. And that's how it is. Like when the pads come on and then the pads come off for a day and then they got to go through I like to call them the boring, like walkthrough practices. That's got to stink for a football player mentally because these guys are built to hit each other and they crave that contact. So when you see the pads come back on, the physicality goes up and these guys are hungry because defensively, like the possibilities are endless for the defense this year. I know they, losing Calais, losing Justin Houston, losing Marcus Peters. It's the guys that are those physical, I guess, and vocal leaders in the locker room. It's tough, and you never know how a team's going to rebound. But then you look at Kyle Hamilton entering his second year, and that's a dude, like, if you look at him next to all the DBs, he makes them look like little kids because he's like a head taller than half the guys on the field. And the physicality he's bringing, there's a reason the Ravens took him in the first round last year with their first pick in the first round because they wanted him to come in and be this guy that could be so versatile. So I think tight ends in the league, opposing tight ends, watch out for Kyle Hamilton because, I mean, the way he's guarding Mark Andrews, they're having battles. I mean, it's looking promising how good he can be.
Man, speaking of Kyle Hamilton, do you remember, I think it was the stadium practice, Rocco, when Kyle Hamilton got burned on a one-on-one with, I think it was an undrafted free agent, and everyone was saying, yeah, Hamilton's a bust. And I said, these drills favor the offense anyway. It's fine. And then it was unbelievable. Do you remember that?
I think it was, I want to say it was Raleigh Webb was the guy who burned him.
That sounds
familiar. And it was like, that was like a clip that's like, people are going to blow out of proportion. Not just, some Ravens fans do it a lot because it's like, why do we take this guy? It's like, you're kind of jumping the gun a little bit. I'd say, you want to be patient. And when you're patient, look what happens with him. You guys got a good one. And I think a steal in Kyle Hamilton and, Ozzie, DaCosta, those guys love their defensive backs. It's like, you can never have enough defensive backs, corners, safeties, whatever. So, I mean, that's why they took him. And I think it's really going to pay off this season. He's going to have a big year.
Yeah, I'm expecting that too. But you mentioned Mekhi Polk leaving early, Rocco. I think Gus Edwards left as well. Were there any other injury updates, and what do you have on those two guys?
Not that I saw. With Gus, we're going to get, depending on whether they're on the field or not tomorrow, we'll get a better update from John Harbaugh. That it's one of those things where if Harbaugh doesn't talk after practice, you don't really, you can't really ask Randy Brown, who spoke today about, hey, Randy, what's going on with Gus? Because you're not going to get an answer. I tried to sneak in something about Rashod Bateman today with Justin Tucker, and he was even like, he basically was like, why are you asking me about Rashod Bateman? Not actually gave a good answer, but that's going to be a Harbaugh question basically tomorrow. The hope is that it's nothing crazy with Gus because just the day prior, he was like, he's asked if he was feeling 100% on the field and back to himself, and he's like, I'm feeling great out here, and it's stunk for Ravens fans over the years, like the running back room. It's like what it could be if JK is healthy in there, if Gus is healthy in there, even Justice Hill, those guys. I remember like last year, it was late in the season. And I think that was the first time those guys had been at a practice or at a game for the first time in a long time. Like it's been a while and it's been tough. Like that running backs room has been, I mean, I hate that I'm saying it, but it's been injury prone. And to get guys healthy, to get guys back, like that's what this team needs, because J.K. Dobbins on the field averaging 5+ yards per carry. I mean, there's a reason why. Gus, it's a reason why you call him the bus. He's just rolling over defenders. And when he gets going, it's hard to stop him. So you hope there's nothing serious with Gus and he can get back on the field. as early as tomorrow and then be good to go. I don't think we're going to see him in the first preseason game by any means, but just to be back on the field, it's going to be a plus.
Yeah, JK averaged 6 yards a carry his rookie season. Gus Edwards has never averaged below 5 in his career. I mean, those two guys, the fact that they've missed them for so long and they've been in and out of the lineup, hopefully Gus is going to be all good. Hopefully tomorrow, and we'll see kind of what happens with how they manage, obviously, Dobbins when he comes back. If he comes back, we don't know what's going on. And then Edwards with however that situation ends up playing out. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll be diving into some updates. Broderick Washington got his money. Jadeveon Clowney could be coming to Baltimore. A lot still to come here on Locked On Ravens. We return our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with Rocco DiSangro. And Rocco, Broderick Washington is a guy that I think's been really underrated on this Ravens defense. And the whole defensive line room, I feel like it's great this year. They lose Calais Campbell. That is a loss, but they have a lot of players. But then next year, you're kind of looking at the lineup before this extension. And you're saying, Travis Jones is like the only guy here that's under contract for next year. So they get Washington signed to an extension, a 3-year deal. I think total money, $17.5 million with $10 million guaranteed there. He spoke after practice, obviously, to everybody. And I think this is a well-deserved deal for Washington. Comes in as a late round pick, earns this money. What have you seen from him so far in training camp, and how's the rest of the defensive line looked?
Broderick's looked pretty well. Like he's looked good. And he's a lot of these defensive linemen, like the Matabikes, the Travis Joneses of the world, and Broderick, they're working with Chuck Smith, Dr. Rush, who's the outside linebackers coach. But these guys, they want to get after the quarterback as much as possible as well, and not just be these run stoppers that just fill holes and fill the gap. With Calais gone, that's obviously tough because he's such a big body. And I know he's getting towards those later years of his career, but with Calais gone, there's a big gap to fill, both, literally and figuratively on that defensive line because of how big he was. Broderick is, he's looked solid throughout camp, and he's going to be asked to step up. And Mike McDonald said he's kind of stepped up as a leader. Travis, year 2, has kind of stepped up as a leader as well. Matabike, big time. But for Broderick, like you said, well-deserved deal. It's, I don't even think he was focused right now. Like the mindset wasn't, all right, I need to get a deal done. It just kind of happened. And it was cool seeing him talk afterwards. And the guys, they brought him out to midfield after practice. Practice ended early. And you heard guys going cha-ching as Harbaugh was like shouting him out and putting him on the spot. So that was cool. He got to share that moment with his teammates. And it's something I asked him about afterwards, and he gave a really good answer. He's like, it's like, basically, this is awesome. But the coolest thing I heard from him today was he's like, my mom wasn't here when I signed on the dotted line. And he's like, if she was, I probably would have cried. And I'm looked at as one of the tough guys on the defensive line, which he is, but it was a really cool moment. And he's like, I'm glad I'm going to be here for, the next 3 years. And he's like, he referred to this place as home. Like this is a place he calls home. So to be here, to pay a guy that wants to be here, and to bolster that defensive line, not only for this season, he was there, but for years to come, that is big for the Ravens, for Mike McDonald, and for the fan base as well, and for Broderick. It's cool.
Yeah, I'm really happy for him. All the work he's put in, you can see that over his growth over the past couple of seasons. It should play a really big role with Calais Campbell gone, as you talked about. But I think a common misconception, Rocco, is that pass rush is only outside linebackers. Like, I know it's not, but people kind of associate it with, the outside linebackers, they're the guys that get the sacks, but interior guys get sacks too. But that doesn't mean Baltimore's not looking at veteran outside linebacker options. Is Jadeveon Clowney is a guy that could come in, and Josina Anderson gave an update late on Wednesday saying that he stayed in the Baltimore area. He's been offered a deal by the Ravens, obviously visited with the team on Tuesday. They've kind of poked around Dewan Smoot and Kyle Van Noy. Justin Houston signed with Carolina over the weekend. And with Odafe Owe and David Ajabo there, Ty Spouser obviously still on the NFI list. They're expecting those guys to take a big jump. So how would Clowney kind of impact this defense, and how have Ajabo and Owe look so far to you?
Jabo and Owe, watching them in individual drills, watching them try to get after the quarterback in team drills, they've looked good. And David Ajabo seems locked in. There's a reason why this guy was a projected first-round pick last season, and he fell to the Ravens, which was great. Unfortunately, because of that pro day injury where he tore the Achilles, but getting him is, I think year 2 for Ajabo is going to be big. And Owe, he just seems more confident this season. He's very reserved, very quiet when you talk to him in the locker room. This year, he's got like more of a swagger to him, more of a feel that like, all right, like it's time to put the league on notice for him, because rookie season, I think it went pretty well for him. And the Ravens, they kind of saw, okay, like we took this guy in the first round, it was worth it. Year 2, it kind of went like this. It was, I wouldn't call it a slump year, but it was not a great year, I don't think, in Odafe's eyes and the fan base's eyes. And he caught a lot of heat for it, because it's like, we took this guy in the first round. What's the deal with him? I think this year, year 3, you get that sophomore slump out of the way. I think Odafe is going to have a big year, and Ojabo. And I think like very similar rooms wise to last season, not talent wise, but like what they had, young talent. You look at the Ravens receivers room last year, who they had, and they were constantly looking at bringing in veterans. And that's why they brought in Deshaun Jackson. I know he was 35, but they were looking at bringing in a seasoned vet to help out, because they had that young talent. With Ajabo, with OA, both young. Bowser, depending on what happens with him when he comes off, like I feel like they want a veteran person. And in Clowney, and with Houston going to the Panthers, I feel like it speeds this process up a little bit. Maybe they were waiting to see, hey, Justin, like, what's the deal? What are you doing? And then what are we going to do? Because that's a guy that, 9.5 sacks last season. He almost got that 10th. And I remember it was such a big deal because of that big bonus. But I mean, he played very great football last season for where he was age-wise. And to bring in a guy like Clowney, former number 1 pick, Pro Bowler as well, I think he could help out the pass rushers. But I think for Ravens fans, like if you don't get Jadeveon Clowney, if you don't get Van Noy, if you don't get other guys that are out there, the veterans out there that you think you want, I think you're in solid hands with OA and Ajabo this year. But the biggest thing is health, and Ajabo staying on the field, and that's going to be a big thing. But motor-wise, I think that the process is being sped up, and he's poised for a big, big season as a pass rusher here in Baltimore.
Yeah, you and I are on the same wavelength there, because I think for me, I feel a lot better about Ajabo and Owe this year. But the thing is, they're essentially 3 deep at outside linebacker, and that's assuming Bowser's healthy. So you can never assume health in this league. So what if Owe has to miss time? What if Ajabo has to miss time? And then you're down to 2, because Tavius Robinson, I think, has the tools, but I just don't think he's there yet. So bringing in a veteran like Clowney could be there. Do you see something with Tavius Robinson, though, that maybe could contribute this year?
I think he's kind of fun to watch, man. He's fun to watch with drills. He's another guy that Chuck Smith spoke very highly about. And while he's a rookie, you got to remember, like, this guy kind of got a late start to football and goes to Ole Miss, does his thing there, and comes in. So he's still like very much like, I want to say that Tavius is a little bit green as far as like where he is, and it's raw talent, but I think the tools are there for maybe not this season to just like break out and have a stellar rookie season, but you look year 2, year 3, Chuck Smith's going to be working with him. I really like that guy a lot, and his like how he works with them. It's like very just like vocal, hands-on. They respect him and they love him. So it's I think Tavius is going to be fun to watch in a few years. Maybe he's not like the guy as that pass rusher, and I don't think he has to be, but a couple sacks here and there help the team out. And like you said, being 3 deep really right now, he could be a guy that maybe sees some playing time in 2023 if he kind of pans out.
Yeah, if Clowney doesn't work out, if they end up really going with the young guys, then there are snaps to be had, especially if there's an injury. Maybe Robinson can fill that. But I think a Clowney adds, the edge-setting prowess. Has been a little inconsistent with sacks, and there's some questions about the work ethic. But, if the money's right and they feel like they have to add somebody, I think they should. But if they decide not to, we will see if it works out better than the wide receiver room last year, as you kind of made that comparison there. But Rocco, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for hopping on here. This was great. I appreciate all your insight. Please tell people where they can find you and what you're working on.
So you can find me on Twitter at Rocco DiSangro. That's the one I use the most. I have Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. You want to follow me there too. As far as what I'm working on, I'm just, working here at Fox45, doing my thing. And we have the Rip and Rock podcast. We're talking Orioles. It's myself and Ryan Ripken. So we really enjoy that. But that's really it. I love interacting with the fan base. I love interacting with content creators, reporters, people like you, Kevin, who really kill it and do a great job. So like, shout out to you, man. You're doing really great work. People love you here, and you do a fantastic job in covering the team.
Man, I appreciate those kind words, Rocco. And again, please go follow Rocco. I'll put all the links to his work, the Twitter, obviously, in the description below. And he gives great training camp updates over there and is plugged in with the team. So you don't want to miss out on everything he's working on. Plus, the Orioles are pretty good this year, huh? So the Orioles are they've made the journey from the end of football season to the beginning a little more bearable with, I think, the year they've had so far, which has been great.
It's awesome, man. It's like last year or like past years, I guess, because I've only been here for 2 years. You look at the Orioles and it's like they're kind of done being talked about in September. It's like all Ravens all the time, training camp, preseason. And now like we're in the heart of, August. I'm looking at what date it is right now and like coming up and the Orioles are atop the AL standings, like AL East, American League. It's great. Great time to be a sports fan here in Baltimore for sure.
Man, it is incredible. So hopefully the Orioles make a run, the Ravens make a run, and Baltimore is a sports town. I know some people don't think it is, but it really is, as the Orioles are coming back and the Ravens have always been consistent here. But Rocco, I appreciate you again. Thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Ravens today. Be sure to subscribe, follow along in audio form when we get back here tomorrow. We're rounding out the week, more Ravens content ahead of their first preseason game with the Eagles on Saturday. Stay tuned for that. Plenty to talk about on Locked On Ravens. I'll see you right back here tomorrow.